Now, the city of Cape Town housing crisis could be reduced if underutilized land currently occupied by the South African National Defence Force was released. This is according to civil society groups who are calling for President Cyril Ramaphosa to take action. Their calls are also echoed by the Metro municipality's officials. Adi Kumar, the executive director of Ndifuna Ukwazi, joins us now for more on their call. Adi, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. So how do you come to the conclusion that that particular piece of land by the military is not in use or is being underutilized?
So thanks for having me, Tabu. So maybe just to start off, I think all political parties across the spectrum agree that the housing crisis is a ticking time bomb. The patterns of land ownership, spatial segregation, all of these things have really compounded inequality, particularly in cities like Cape Town. Now, the military owns 4 different types of bases in Cape Town, and all of them amount to roughly about 650 odd hectares of land. That's about 650 rugby fields of land that could be used for housing. Now, the questions initially, the momentum behind this campaign was really the fact that the presidency started this idea around the lack of delivery on land reform and urban land reform particularly. And so the call to the presidency was really to say, is all of this military land really being used for the purposes that it needs to be used? Is it not underutilized? And I think a lot of these questions that we raised in the campaign back in 2020 were ultimately responded by the Department of Public Works, saying that yes, there are portions of this land that could be used for human settlements and for housing, and that land can be released and is being released by the Department of Public Works for the housing purposes. So I think the important part is really to be able to put government in a space where they can put the money where their mouth is, because really this is where the rubber hits the road, and really we need to see some housing delivery as the housing crisis is just getting worse and worse.
Why do you think there is this lack of intergovernmental cooperation when it comes to this matter?
I mean, it's an interesting question, because this plea for releasing various parcels of land, which national department, provincial and city-owned land, is not a new call. It's a historical call that many civil society organizations have been making. And in the last few weeks, in the last 2 months or so, I would say, we've learned that the Department of Public Works has offered this land and has released this land to the National Department of Human Settlements and Housing Development Agency. And we wrote to them and we asked them and inquired with them like what their plans and intentions were, but absolutely no response. And it just doesn't feel like there's any urgency to respond to the housing crisis when you have land that can provide housing for 67,000 people in Cape Town, where almost about 500,000 people are without adequate housing. It just seems that should be a high priority for a department that has to spearhead this particular piece of work around housing and adequate housing, etc. So that really is behind this call is why is there no action? Why is there no urgency from the National Department? Why is there no urgency from the Housing Development Agency to act on land that is being offered and released to them?
And in terms of the land itself, I mean, is it land that can be easily serviced at a reasonable cost?
So the land is extremely well located and in economic centers, easily accessible to the city center, offers great opportunities. There are concerns around environmental concerns, but when we presented our submission to the presidency, we did do a feasibility. We did look at like where the wetland areas are, what the ownership patterns were, because some of the land involves restitution, and we accounted for a lot of these things. Obviously, because it's military land, we don't have access to survey information and all of those kind of things, but a proper feasibility needs to be done. But even the Department of Public Works, through their walks with the former minister and the Minister of Defense and etc., who visited the sites, they have said, even in some sites that 32 hectares of land is available currently that could be used for housing and human settlements.
So I see here, as you put it, I mean, it's an ongoing matter. In fact, at some point we had Patricia de Lille, when she was still in the Department of Public Works, in an argument with Jordan Hill-Lewis, Mayor of Cape Town. But one of the issues that could possibly be standing in the way now is the approval from the trust, because this is land that was donated by the Graf Trust to the state, I believe, and the trust would need to approve any development on the land.
That's correct. So I think there has been some of the reporters from other media outlets have reached out to the Craft Trust, and there seems to be some kind of appetite. But this is what we expect of government at the moment, right, Tabo? We expect the government to resolve these complex issues, because you cannot have, in a city like Cape Town, like 600 hectares of land that just sits underutilized for 30 years when people are living on the street, people are living in every public space that they can find in the inner city and in informal settlements. So I think that is the expectation, and not all the land is encumbered by the Craft Trust. There are other parcels of land that are available which the military controls that could be used. So I think that's what we're urging the department to show some kind of urgency, some kind of clear intention of what their plans are, when some feasibility work will be done, when some of the negotiations will be concluded and even initiated for that matter.
Adi, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. That's Adi Kumar, Executive Director at Ndifuna Ukwazi. They are, of course, amplifying their call for that military land that is underutilized to be released now for housing.